I don't think we're alone out here. Those were the last words my friend Max whispered to me before we both froze, our breaths hanging like pale ghosts in the chilly forest air. The campfire crackled weakly, the flames casting jittery shadows against the towering pines surrounding our campsite. We had been out here for 2 nights already, miles away from the nearest road, relishing the isolation. But now, that same isolation felt like a noose tightening around our necks. It all started earlier that day. Max and I, along with his younger sister Leah, had decided to hike further into the forest to explore an area we'd marked on our map, a clearing nestled between 2 ridges. The trail was faint, overgrown in parts, and the deeper we went, the quieter the forest became. Even the usual chatter of birds and insects seemed muted, as if something unseen had pressed a finger to its lips. The clearing was beautiful, though, wildflowers scattered across the grass, framed by jagged rocks. We set up camp and spent the afternoon cooking and joking around. But by dusk, a subtle unease had crept into my mind. Leah had wandered off to gather firewood and returned looking pale, her arms loaded with sticks. "There's something weird out here," she muttered, dropping the wood at my feet. "What do you mean?" I asked. She hesitated. "It's like I'm being watched. Every time I turned around, I thought I saw someone in the trees. But when I looked, nothing was there." Max laughed it off. "You've been watching too many horror movies." But Leah's unease stuck with me. As night fell, we circled the fire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows. The wind had picked up, rustling the branches overhead. It was during one of those lulls, between laughter and crackling wood, that I heard it, a faint snap, like a branch breaking underfoot. I turned sharply, peering into the dark forest beyond the firelight. "Did you hear that?" Max shrugged. "It's probably just an animal." "Too big for an animal," Leah whispered, inching closer to the fire. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it into the woods. Nothing. Just endless trees, their shadows stretching and twisting like reaching fingers. "Relax," Max said. "We're in the middle of nowhere. There's no one else out here." But he was wrong. Then, from the edge of the clearing, I saw it, a faint silhouette standing between the trees. It was tall, motionless, almost blending with the shadows. My throat tightened as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. "Who's there?" I shouted. No response. Max took a step forward, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't." The figure shifted slightly, as if swaying. And then, with a sudden, unnatural speed, it moved out of sight. "What the hell was that?" Max whispered, his voice barely audible. "We're leaving," I said, my heart hammering. "First thing in the morning." But morning felt like an eternity away. Back in my tent, I clutched a knife I brought for cooking and kept my ears trained for any sound. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, I woke to Leah screaming. Later, as we lay in our tents, I found myself unable to sleep. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind, set my nerves on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. It was around midnight when I heard it again, a steady, deliberate crunch of footsteps circling the campsite. My blood turned cold. "Max," I hissed, poking my head out of my tent. He was already sitting up, his face pale. "You hear it too?" We grabbed our flashlights and stepped out, careful not to wake Leah. The fire had died down to embers, and the forest was pitch black. We scanned the perimeter, the beams of our flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Hello?" Max called out, his voice trembling. Silence. I bolted out of the tent, flashlight in hand. Leah was standing by the fire pit, her face streaked with tears. "It was in my tent," she sobbed. I woke up, and there was someone crouching there. Max and I exchanged horrified looks. "Pack up," I said, my voice firm despite the fear clawing at my chest. "We're leaving now." We worked quickly, breaking down the tents and shoving our gear into backpacks. All the while, I felt that presence, like unseen eyes boring into my back. The hike back to the car was brutal. The trail we had followed so easily before now seemed foreign and treacherous. The trees pressed in from all sides, and every so often, we heard that same deliberate crunch of footsteps, always just out of sight. At one point, Leah stumbled, and Max bent to help her. That's when I saw it again, about 50 yards away, half hidden behind a tree. The same figure, its head tilted as if observing us. "Ron," I whispered, grabbing Leah's arm. "Ron!" We bolted, the path blurring as adrenaline took over. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if it was following us. When we finally reached the car, we piled in and sped off, not stopping until we were miles away. Only then did I let myself breathe. Even now, I can't explain what we saw out there. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person, at least not any kind of person I've ever seen. Sometimes, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I hear footsteps outside my window.
I'm not easily shaken by the outdoors. Growing up with a dad who loved hiking and camping, I spent plenty of time in the wilderness. But last year, I had an experience that left a chill deep in my bones, the kind that surfaces when I'm alone at night. I can't explain what happened, not completely, but I'll tell you what I do know. It was late October. My friend Dave and I planned a weekend camping trip, hoping to catch the last few days of autumn before winter swallowed everything up. We picked a spot we'd never been to before, a remote area about a 4-hour drive from the city, far off any main roads. This area was known for its isolation, but that's what drew us to it. A break from everything and everyone sounded perfect. We left early Friday morning. The drive was long and uneventful, and by mid-afternoon, we reached the trailhead that would lead us to our campsite. We were miles from the nearest town, surrounded by thick woods, and even though it was still daytime, the trees seemed to crowd in on us, casting shadows that made it feel like dusk had already settled in. But we were excited, full of energy, as we strapped on our packs and started our trek. After a couple of hours, we found the spot we'd marked on the map, a flat area by a small, murky pond. We pitched our tent, set up a fire pit, and unloaded our gear. By the time the fire was crackling and dinner was cooking, the sun had fully set and the stars were out in full force. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet that city life rarely affords. As we sat by the fire, I noticed something odd. Dave had gone to fetch more firewood, and I felt watched. The feeling was subtle, like an itch at the back of my mind, but it was there. I scanned the tree line, but everything was still. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just not used to being so isolated. When Dave came back, I didn't mention it. We ate, talked, and eventually crawled into the tent to sleep. But that sense of being watched lingered, hovering just at the edge of my thoughts as I drifted off. A few hours later, I woke up with a jolt. Something had snapped outside the tent. I held my breath, listening. The sound was faint but deliberate, like the crunch of dry leaves underfoot. I glanced at Dave, who was still asleep, his breathing steady. My pulse quickened. Maybe it was an animal, I reasoned, a deer or a raccoon sniffing around. I convinced myself to lie back down, trying to relax, but sleep wouldn't come. I don't know how long I lay there, straining to hear any sound. Just when I thought I might be overreacting, another noise came, a low, scraping sound like something dragging across the ground near the fire pit. I sat up, my heart racing now. Carefully, I unzipped the tent just a crack, peeking outside. The fire had died down to embers, casting a dim orange glow. Shadows stretched across the campsite, distorting everything. I scanned the area, but saw nothing. No movement, no animals, no person. After a few minutes, I exhaled and closed the tent. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me. Morning brought a welcome sense of normalcy. The unease I'd felt during the night seemed silly in the daylight. Dave and I decided to hike around the area, explore a bit before packing up and heading back. We wandered through the woods, admiring the leaves that had turned deep red and gold, crunching underfoot. For hours, we walked, taking pictures and joking around. We even found an old, broken-down cabin buried deep in the trees, likely abandoned decades ago. It was barely more than a skeleton, rotting wood and rusted nails sticking out at odd angles, but it added a strange charm to the place. We returned to our campsite around mid-afternoon, tired but happy. As we approached, though, I noticed something strange. Our backpacks, which we'd left leaning against a tree, were gone. I looked around, thinking maybe an animal had dragged them off, but they weren't anywhere to be seen. Did you move our stuff? I asked Dave, trying to keep my voice steady. He shook his head, looking equally confused. We scoured the area, but there was no sign of our gear. Finally, we found them, both packs lying side by side about 50 feet away, behind a cluster of thick trees. They hadn't been rummaged through or damaged, just moved. Dave laughed it off, saying maybe we'd both lost track of where we left them. But I could tell he was rattled too. We returned to the campsite in silence, and the unease from the previous night crept back over me. I tried to ignore it, focusing on packing up so we could leave as soon as possible. But as we were breaking down the tent, I noticed something else. Carved into the trunk of a tree just beside where we'd pitched our tent was a small, crude symbol, an X with a circle around it. The cut marks looked fresh, the wood underneath pale against the rough bark. I pointed it out to Dave, and his face went pale. That wasn't there yesterday, he muttered. He took a few steps back, glancing around as though expecting to see someone hiding in the trees. We decided to skip the rest of the packing and just grab what we could. By now, both of us felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on us. It was no longer just eerie, it was sinister. I felt like we were intruders, and whoever or whatever was out here wanted us gone. The hike back was tense and fast. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the brush made us jump. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone following us, but the trail was empty. It was only when we reached the car that I felt a shred of relief. We threw our gear into the back and peeled out, leaving the campsite and that strange symbol behind us. The drive home was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, call it paranoia. But the events of that trip lingered in my mind, gnawing at the edges of my logic. Who would move our things? Who would mark that tree? Later, I did some research, trying to understand what that symbol might mean. I couldn't find anything concrete, just vague references to old hiking markers, symbols left by other campers. But every explanation felt insufficient. The truth was, it could have been anything. A warning, a message, or just someone's idea of a joke. It's been months since that trip, and I still don't have any answers. All I know is that something was out there in the woods with us, something that didn't want us there. And the next time I go camping, I'll be picking a spot far, far away from that pond.
The biting cold of the night air hit me the very moment I stepped out from the comforting warmth of the cabin. The moon hung low, casting silvery shadows that danced eerily among the gnarled trees. It was supposed to be a getaway, a means of escaping the chaos of everyday life. Instead, as I glared into the darkness beyond our patch of light, suddenly the woods seemed to come alive, almost sentient, swallowing the sounds of my friend's laughter behind me. "Are you coming?" Matt yelled from the cabin, his voice seeming to reverberate off the deep forest. I hesitated, staring into thick brambles bordering our clearing, thick with tangled roots and interwoven branches that cast strange shapes in the moonlight. "Yeah, just give me a second," I replied, forcing a smile as I turned toward him. The plan was simple: hike deeper into the woods, do some stargazing, and then head back out into the warmth of the fire. I had done the particular hike a dozen times before, but this time felt different. The air was too still, too charged. Then, that unsettling feeling of being watched began to creep into the back of my mind. I rummaged through my backpack for a flashlight, feeling the chill crawl up my spine as my fingers grazed the cool metal of a small camping knife. As I made my way into the forest, the trees stood threateningly like sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky. The distant chirping of crickets abruptly ceased as I ventured further away from the cabin. Probably just my imagination, I thought, shaking my head to dispel the ghostly chill which had taken residence in my chest. After a 10-minute walk, I emerged into an open area that was at the same time enchanting and forbidding, open sky full of stars. The kind of place where ancient tales of horror are whispered by leaves. I switched my flashlight on and its ray cut through the darkness like a knife. My heart was beating fast while I began to circle around. The woods seemed to breathe, shifting in unnatural ways that the wind whipped by with little greeting whispers, instead coming out as sharp hisses. I sat on a log lying on the ground, trying to steady my nerves. It was quiet now, too quiet. The laughter from the cabin had muted into a muffled memory, and I desperately wanted to go back inside, but my legs seemed stuck to the spot. I had an undeniable feeling that something was standing beyond the trees, just waiting for that opportune time to pounce. Just as I was getting up, I heard something soft rustling in a generally leftward direction, deeper in the woods. "Matt, is that you?" I called, trying to keep the quaver out of my voice. Silence fell, heavy and malarial, settling around me like a tourniquet. I could feel the blood draining from my face. Then it came again, this time louder. A slow, purposeful crushing of leaves. The shadows lengthened further as I turned my flashlight in that direction, and my heart violently thudded against my rib cage as the light fluttered erratically, casting wild shadows across the trees. I rummaged my surroundings. Just the wind. I muttered to myself, clenching the knife tightly in my sweat-soaked palms. But the sounds grew louder, clearer like footsteps. I finally summoned the courage to rise to my feet. Something was after me, and I knew it, an instinctive terror tearing at my sanity. I cast the light to my left once more. The beam buckled, showing only swirling darkness defined by the trees. I was suddenly very conscious of how far into the woods I had gone. "Seriously, guys, this isn't funny," I yelled again, hoping for just about any sound in response. Slowly, I began to back up, my flashlight held firm. But nobody laughed, nobody answered. All I could hear was the ragged sound of my breathing and crunching that sounded like it moved with me. Just about the time I thought I was back in safely, a shape broke the tree line beside me. My heart arrested. An animal? A trick of the light? Then it was there, a giant form, considering and silent, watching me from the cover of darkness. I could hardly see its features, but its eyes. They glowed unnaturally, fixed on me as if weighing me. I stumbled back in alarm, falling to the ground. The flashlight flickered once more and then went out, plunging me into the dark. I scrambled, afraid even the slightest movement would reveal a hiding self. I took a deep, shaky breath, listening intently as the creature stepped closer, moving with deliberation, unnatural silence. Just when I thought I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears, the silence shattered with a blood-curdling scream. My friends had come looking for me. The terror that I felt turned to anger mixed with fear. I had put them in danger too. I sprang to my feet, not caring if the creature was close. I ran in the direction of their voices, shouting out my friends' names, and now the woods were some sort of maze filled with fear and panic. Finally, I found them, and then relief washed over me until I turned back for that last look. There was nothing but silent trees. No glowing eyes, no sound, just that residual dread. Something in that suffocating dark would always be watching. It wasn't until we were safely back in the cabin that I realized the silence in my heart hadn't lifted. Over the next several days, whispers went around amongst them as to what I had seen and heard. But I said nothing then and nothing afterwards, either. I would not have dared utter the profundity of that terror, from some creature lurking just beyond the shadows. Even now, in the safety of everyday existence, I shun the woods. The thought of entering that isolation, knowing something akin to that could still be out there, waiting, sensing for the moment the darkness would take me again, well, those are terrors I don't care to endure. And each time the trees sway, whispering sweet nothings in the cool night breeze, I can almost hear that slow, deliberate crunching in the distance, waiting patiently for my return.